Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rich MOSKAL. I'm the director of the Chicago Film Office, and I want to welcome you to the Creative Expo and this conversation with film producer Bob Teitel. You know, Chicago has been very fortunate in being the backdrop for literally hundreds of films in recent years, but when the producers of those films just happen to be Chicagoans, the films evoke an authenticity that is intimate like any other films that are made here. And this particular producer is responsible for some of the most successful urban pictures in motion picture history. Soul Food, Barbershop, Beauty Shop sparked lively conversations about race all over this country, grossed over $100 million, and led to several successful television series. Graduate of Columbia College, Bob Teitel formed his first production company with director George Tillman while they were both in school at Columbia. And in 2009, they released the feature Notorious, the true story of Notorious B.I.G., which was picked up by Fox Searchlight. Later followed by the features Faster, Baytown Outlaws, Jane Mansfield's Car, and most recently, The Inevitable Defeat of Mr. and Pete, which screened at last year's Sundance Film Festival. All the big pictures, all the big budgets, all the success. But let's go back before that even was a reality to what was essentially your first full-length feature.
Yeah, it was called Scenes for the Soul, but before that, George and I made a 30-minute film called Paula while we were at Columbia College. It was like our thesis project, and that film won Student Academy Award in the Midwest, not the big award, but it got you to like the nomination thing. And then we used that as a catalyst to raise $150,000 it took 44 different people to raise $150,000. And we made Scenes for the Soul. And I mean, it was really grassroots. It was crazy. It was like, I think it was like 92. I was 24, 25, never raised money before.
Were you still in school at that point, or was it?
No, I was out of school for like 2 years, and you know, making music videos, PAing whenever we could. I see a couple people out there that hired us early on, which is great to see. And we just raised the money. My father was in the automotive business. He had a little paint store, and I worked there my whole life, from like 9 years old till 25, literally to the day I drove out to California. I mean, I worked that day. And so a lot of that money was raised to a lot of people in the automotive business in Chicago who own body shops, because I've known these people my whole life, and I would just hound them to death. And my old man was like, dude, you're going to lose all this money. These people are going to hate me. You know, it's going to turn ugly. And the funniest thing when I was doing this, the one thing was interesting, I kept a ledger. And this ledger was kind of bullshit, but it worked. It was like I would go to people, keep the date I met them, and then I would say, hey, you know, I went to you before. I had $10,000. Today we have $45,000 raised. And it was all a lie. But I kept it so I would get caught in a lie. So I kept all these amounts. Like, well, I told this guy at 45. Last time I saw him, okay. But I had to get to that money regardless. I had to get to that $150,000. The only way I was going to get to that was to show people that we were moving quicker than we really were, and it was the only way to kind of get it, but it took 44 people to raise $150,000.
Over how much time?
It was about 10 to 11 months to raise that money. Then we shot the film in November of '93, and then we drove out to California in November of '95, and then December of '95, we were fortunate enough to sell it to Savoy Pictures for $1 million, and we tripled everybody's money. And you think, I mean, we were fortunate, we were blessed, it was incredible, but the movie never came out. It was never released. So it's like you kind of go through this high and low, and it was a roller coaster, but boy, it toughened you up quick. Like,
why was it never released?
Wasn't that good, one thing. That's the truth. It was like, it was a studio that bought it, then they went out of business. And quite frankly, it was a good little movie. Did it warrant a big theatrical release? Not at all. It should have been, if we were lucky enough, it should have been released in like 10 to 12 theaters, and if it caught momentum, but there was no stars in it, no one was in it. So, but we were fortunate at that time when we sold it, You know, there were people before us like Spike Lee and so forth. And that whole independent film craze at the time was like prior to us. So we were caught up in that independent film wave at that time, which helped tremendously.
And in terms of selling that to Savoy, as much as they ultimately went out of business, was that an easy door to knock on? Were they interested in you because you were just at the right place at the right time with the right type of project?
No, I mean, that was really the agents and selling the movie and kind of the hype of it all. And I mean, it was quick. You know, you went from like sleeping in the car to selling the film for $1 million 3 weeks later. I mean, it doesn't always happen like that, obviously. But, you know, that film never coming out, like kind of like you got this high, they put an article in Variety, they put you up in this nice place, and as soon as that company was sold and the film didn't come out, they kicked you out of the place, kind of came back home to Chicago to regroup for 3 months, 4 months. Then we went back out to California with the film Soul Food, with the script. And, you know, we were down to the last couple dollars, and we were fortunate enough to meet Babyface through our agents who sold the movie. So obviously, since the movie never came out, it got us in the door. That was the most important thing. And I think that's a great test for everybody to kind of realize with your first film or second film. It's not so much about selling it and getting in a movie theater, because that is so difficult today. It's unbelievably hard. It's really about using it as your calling card. You know, I mean, I wouldn't tell your investors that when you're raising money, because they don't want to hear that, you know what I mean? But the truth of the matter is, you got to get out there and, you know, you make a project, and if it's strong enough and it could garner some attention, it kind of sets you up for your next project. And that's what that film, in retrospect, really did. If it would have came out, maybe it would have came out, no one would have saw it and would have hurt us more than if it would have, you know, not come out at all. So it's interesting how you look back at things. But at the time, you know, you're devastated.
I'm sure. In fact, I've talked to a lot of, particularly first-time filmmakers, young filmmakers, who put all of their hopes, all of their dreams, all of their expectations into their first picture, when in fact, it seems like that first picture is really just a resume builder in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, this is my philosophy. No one has to take this for what it's worth. But, you know, if you're going to law school, you're going to medical school, you get 4 years after you're done with college, you have to go to another 4 years of school. So if you look at it like, this is your calling card, this is my med school, this is my kind of training ground, I think it's a great way to look at it. I mean, obviously you want to sell it, your expectation is to sell it, but if you make a great film, your goal is really, what's my next film going to be? And how can I make it better than the first one? I mean, that's how you really got to look at things these days.
So, Soul Food, you go back out to LA, regrouped, refreshed, script in hand.
Right, and we were fortunate enough to meet Babyface. And at the time, he just came off writing every song on the Waiting to Exhale soundtrack, which sold like 13 million copies, which garnished so much money, more than the movie Waiting to Exhale did. So they gave him a deal. And then this was his first movie. And I don't, you know, to be quite frank, I don't really think Fox paid attention to the script that much. They just knew they were going to try to sell 13 million copies of an album. Again. So for us, obviously, we were in, you know, he was at the right place in his career, and obviously we were fortunate enough that the film turned out well and garnished a lot of attention, and that album sold 3 million copies, or 2.5 million copies, not 13. But, you know, for Babyface, it was kind of his calling card into the film business, and his wife, Tracy Edmonds. And
to your credit, I mean, your career just took off at that point. I mean, you went from essentially not really being known by anybody to being the makers of Soul Food. And I'm just curious as to, did you feel prepared for that? From coming from nothing to almost fast track?
You know what? I mean, I never looked at it that way. It was like, what's next? Never got caught up in it. You know what I mean? I've still been married to the same wife for 13 years. I'm not divorced 5 times like everybody else out there. I just didn't get caught up. I was just like, what's the next movie? You know, I got to focus. What's the next movie? What am I going to do next? How could we be better than the next one? And then watching everybody else making movies always inspired me and kind of made me competitive. But I never got caught up in that kind of wheel. It was always like, we were fortunate enough that a movie did well enough where it gave us a deal at Fox and gave us access to other pieces of material that we would have never seen. And to meet people and phenomenal other filmmakers, which always kind of inspired me. Other producers, watching what they do, always kind of pushes me and inspires me to kind of move forward.
Well, speaking of that, you and George Tillman have been partnered right since school, right? So
25 years. Yeah.
how did that partnership form, and what are the advantages of having that partnership? You're not going it alone. You definitely sharing the burden there.
I think the best thing about the partnership is we do two totally different things, or we'd kill each other. I mean, we want to kill each other now, but at least we do two different things. You know, you've been together so long, it's funny how you look back on it. But, you know, I produce. I never wanted to direct or write, and he's a director. So partnerships, when two people have two different roles, seem to last longer, in my opinion, when you kind of look at other people in Hollywood. And I think that was our key, you know what I mean? I never wanted to direct. And he produced with me on other projects, but his producerial role is a little different than mine, you know? So we kind of balanced each other very well. We obviously have the same taste, or we wouldn't be working together as long as we have.
After Soul Food, I think the very next project you did that actually was made was Men of Honor, Robert De Niro, Cuba Gooding Jr.
Correct.
Much bigger budget than you were accustomed to.
Oh yeah, that was $32 million, and Soul Food was 7.5. And it was amazing. It was like the attention we got with Soul Food. You know, the script was kind of laying around, and I remember one of our agents showed us the script and said, "Wow, this is an amazing story. Why didn't anybody do the story?" And they said, "Well, Bill Cosby optioned this man's rights, and they wrote this script, and it's been languishing forever." And there was always interest from Robert De Niro, but never a commitment. So when we took that project to the studio, they basically said, "Okay, if you get Robert De Niro and someone else, you know, we'll make the movie." And I'm like, "That's easy. That's not going to be tough. He already likes it. Not that he's going to like us, but at least he likes the script." But then it was like, "Okay, well, you got to get him for a third of his price, and you got to get Cuba Gooding for a third of his price." I'm like, "Well, how am I going to do that?" You know, I'm not equipped, or I don't know enough yet to do that. And he said, "Well, this is the budget. If you could get these guys to cut their rate and do this." And to their credit, they were really passionate about the material, and obviously such a great American story that they were, you know, after we met with them separately, they were on board, which kind of pushed the project forward. And that was, you know, an amazing process.
Intimidating in terms of the...
What's that, I'm sorry?
Intimidating in terms of the level of talent that you were dealing with, or certainly the pedigree of people that you were dealing with?
I think to George's credit, he probably was less intimidated. I think I was more. But once you got to know these guys, and I really didn't feel that for some reason, you know, it's more like, I remember asking him, like, you know, Mr. De Niro, like, "How do you like to work?" And he would go, "Well, just do what you guys did on that last movie. I like that movie." He never said the name. "I like that movie. Yeah, just do whatever you did." And the one thing that was to my benefit, he would always ask me questions. And I would be, "I don't know. I have no idea." And I think he liked that I wasn't full of shit like everybody. And I was just like honest, like, "I don't know, but I'll find out." And then he would ask questions. I mean, the guy he's an amazing man to this day. We're fortunate enough to, you know, keep in touch with him. And he was so prepared that you kind of wanted to step up. Like, I remember there was a time when the character he played was amalgamation of like 3 different people, Army chiefs, Navy chiefs in the Army. So it's kind of a combination of these 3 guys. But one guy was still alive that the writer knew. So I remember he said, "Could you get a videotape of that guy?" And I said, "Yeah, what do you want him doing?" He said, "Just have him walk, have him, if he's got tattoos, take off his shirt, kind of thing." And he just wanted to soak everything in. And, you know, we videotaped this guy walking. You know, he had tattoos, and De Niro put the same tattoos on himself, and he never took off his shirt, but he still had the tattoos on. I mean, it's just like method to the nth degree. And you just wanted to step up for these guys. You just wanted to show that, like, I'll get it done, and you got it done. And I think they respected that, both of them.
And that was your first picture working outside of Chicago, frankly, right?
Yeah, exactly.
On water, which is a complicated place to be working.
Yeah, it was in Portland, Oregon, and outside Seattle, Washington, and then back in L.A. in a tank in the ocean in Long Beach, California. So that
Was it difficult to work? Was the military?
No, that was a great story too. It's like before the movie, obviously it doesn't show the Navy in the greatest light, but obviously these incidents were all true. So, before the movie, myself, George, and Carl Brashear, the real man, who it's about, we went to the Pentagon. We went to all these different places to kind of get the seal of approval, met with many high-ranking Navy officers. That was an experience unto itself. And everybody knew this man's story. Everybody in the military heard of him. So that kind of gave us the leg up. But we needed their support to make the film, or the film would have never gotten made. It would have been too expensive, and it just wouldn't have happened. So we needed that at first. Then we were fortunate enough to screen the film at the White House 2 months before Bill Clinton left office, which was pretty amazing in itself, But the Washington galvanized around that movie. You could do no wrong, you know what I mean? Went to the Republican convention and played it for 3 days, just crazy stuff like that.
Wow.
But it was a great experience.
So, from that point forward, it seems to me that you were balancing multiple projects. You had a production company, you were developing scripts.
That's kind of when it started. At that point, it was like, today I juggle so many projects, it's not even funny. And some things come up. Like yesterday, one thing I've been working on for 7, 8 years, skyrocketed down, plummeted, to something else came up yesterday. I juggle multiple projects. And at that time, it started, at first we were like, okay, here's this movie, we're going to do this movie. Here's this movie, we're going to do this movie. And after Men of Honor, it wasn't that easy. And that's when, I kind of thought of this idea of doing a movie in an African-American barbershop. Because it always dawned on me when, I'm Puerto Rican, so I used to go to this Puerto Rican barbershop. My cousins used to take me to, Humboldt Park. So I saw a little of it, but didn't really, gravitate towards me. But then, when George and I were in LA, we had one car. We shared one car for a long time. And I used to take him to this barbershop. And just because I liked going, because it was like a riot. I was like, wow, this is a great world. And I kept thinking to myself, God, this would make a great movie someday. This would make a great movie someday. Then I found the script that wasn't quite what I wanted, but it was kind of the general basis of I could see something in it. And we had a deal at Fox, and I was like, George, you should direct this movie. He's like, you know what? No, let's just produce it. I'm not really a comedy guy. Let's find someone else. Let's grow the company. I said, okay. So I went to Fox with the script, and they passed on it 3 different times. I kept going, you got to do this movie. I see it. I get it. And they passed, and we took it to MGM, there was an executive there who used to work at Fox who we knew pretty well, and he got it right away, and we developed that script at MGM for a year. Went through a lot of incarnations of that script, from funny to a lot of heart. Even Bernie Mac did a reading for us at one time. We wanted him to play the Cedric part first, and we had readings, 2 or 3 different readings, and that was from Robert De Niro, which was, he would never do a movie unless he did something like this, where all the actors would sit up here, maybe 10 people out there, and he would read the script out loud. And for him, that was his way of seeing if he liked the material. So to make this film great, we just kept doing readings after readings, and never really focused on the comedy. We were more focused on telling a great story with a lot of heart. And I think that's why that film did so well, because it wasn't kind of your typical urban film at that time. Everything was kind of broad back then. The comedies were broad. This was kind of grounded. Cube's story was anybody could relate to, of wanting to please his father and kind of taking on a shop and realizing the value of it. So once that was kind of grounded and rooted in the heart of that story, that's kind of made that film take off. And then we did the sequel, which wasn't that great, but we were pushed to do it. And I remember at first, I'm like, I don't want to do a sequel, thinking, now, you're an idiot if you don't do a sequel, you know what I mean? But that was that mentality back then. You were a filmmaker, I don't want to do a sequel. First one was great. I'm glad we did it. I wish it was better, but now we're going to do a 3rd one, and I am not balking at that. You know what I mean? They want to do a 3rd installment now. So we might do that, and we don't know yet, but it kind of took off. Then we had the idea of doing Beauty Shop. Just kind of came to us naturally, organically. And that's when Queen Latifah and her kind of company got involved with that.
And then did you play a role in the television spin-offs of
You know what the
features?
funny thing is? The irony of that TV show, which was god-awful, was John Ridley, who won the Oscar, was the writer and director from 12 Years Slave. So he wrote the pilot, and he directed it, and it was terrible. I mean, terrible. Now the dude wins an Oscar, like, only in Hollywood, you know what I mean? That kind of happens. And I'm watching the whole time at the Oscar, like, this dude killed my TV series. Now the guy just won an Oscar. I mean, what do you know, right? Because that show should have gone on forever. That was a better TV show idea than it was a movie idea, you know? But, I mean, to his credit, he's a great writer. I mean, he just kept going and going.
So can you talk a little bit about, and literally just like your day-to-day, with these projects that are on the rise or on the outs, and trying to find that perfect, it is, you tell me, but it sounds like it's very much of a perfect storm of the talent's available, the script is right, the studio's into it, you've somehow managed to find the money, and everybody's available at the same time. How do you go about managing that?
I mean, I'm still learning, honestly. I'm still trying to figure it all out. I'm trying to figure out how to juggle stuff. I know what you have to do now is you really got to let stuff go. I mean, that's as important as keeping some things, is learning when to say, you know what, this is not going to happen. I'm better off focusing my energy towards something else. I mean, that cliche of time is money, it's actually true. It's got to be about time management. You got to quantify your time. You got to focus on what you think is going to make it. So for me now, when I read a script, I can like it, but who cares if I like it? If I can't make it, I don't want to touch it. I just have no desire anymore because I can't spend the time, you know. But then there's movies like John Ridley's 12 Years Slave. Like, he writes the script. If you would have told me like a movie like that would have gotten made, I would have laughed at you. But then Brad Pitt's company reads it, and it's Brad Pitt, so then he could do it. But to their credit, you got to, if you have a project in that kind of vein, and which is tough to do, it's all up to you to be passionate about it, to stick with it. But for me now, I'm kind of focused on what, if I read it, okay, I like it, but if I read it, can I get it made? So right now, I have this chart on my Google chart, and I manage all these projects, and I go through them every day. And, you know, there was a project we had, like, I have 5 movies that take place in Chicago.
Right now, in development?
Right now, that are close. One is called William Hanhart. That's the title. He's a real-life character. He was a Chicago cop in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Tough son of a bitch and amazing cop, but he kind of played with the other side of the law. And the last 10 years of his life, he went away to prison for kind of, you know, however you want to say, you know, working with the mob a little. But he was one of the toughest Chicago cops. Great story. Never seen it before. We have a story called Tower, which is based off a book, which Aaron Paul really likes, and Jai Courtney, star Terminator, and Ray Winstone, which could take place anywhere. It's actually written for New York, but obviously I want to take place in Chicago because I think it gives it a little more edge, and obviously I want to shoot here. So, but then there's another project called Disco Sucks, which everybody probably remembers, the Steve Dahl story of the Comiskey Park when they blew up the records. That's a script we had for probably 5-6 years. Now, during that 5-6 years, I wasn't working on it all the time. I think we stopped for a while, for maybe a year and a half. Unfortunately, the writer passed away. There was a director on board. We couldn't get it going at the time. So then we found a new director who actually happens to be from Chicago. They're doing another pass on the script. Like, that's a film I think I could get made. You know what I mean? A lot of people think I can't, but I think I can get that made. We have a story called Guru, which is the story of Del Close from Second City, the great comedic teacher who taught Belushi, Murray, Harold Ramis, I mean, everybody, just to name a few. And that project's been going on like 8-9 years. And we had Jeff Bridges on it for a year, and then he passed on it. You know what I mean? Like, after being attached to it, he kind of moved on from it. So, I mean, and I got to stick with it, you know what I mean? Then there was another actor on it, and we heat pat. I mean, so I just got to like stick with these things. But that's a project to me that is finance. I just have to find the right person. But I mean, look, that's 8-9 years. Disco Sucks, six years. You know what I mean? And last week we sold a TV show to FX. When I say sold, I mean they want to buy it. We got to close the deals, which is always tricky. But it's a true story of a guy out of Chicago named Scotty Brown, who in 1975, at the age of 14, became this, believe it or not, this pot dealer in Addison, Illinois. It's kind of the movie's like Goodfellas meets Dazed and Confused, but it's a TV show. And it's a true story. We cut a sizzle reel together that was unbelievable, and FX bought it in a room. But it's like this guy became the biggest pot dealer at 16 and quit school, and things obviously spiraled out of control. Started selling marijuana with the mob. I mean, you couldn't make up the story. I'm not doing it any justice right now, but that was a story that kind of came out of Chicago. I'm inspired by doing stories out of Chicago. I mean, a lot. Like, I read the Tribune, the Sun-Times every day. I don't even read the LA Times, could care less. Like, I know more what's going on here. Because I read everything. The Chicago Reader, I got sent to my house for years before I went online. That's how I found the Guru story with Del Close. Then I teamed up with Diane and Andrew Alexander at Second City. But I read that out of there. You know, this is going to sound kind of crazy, but like, I think 3 times within the last 6 or 7 years, I flew out here by myself and didn't tell anybody I was here. And I know it's going to sound crazy, but I would walk just because I had to get out of LA. And I would come here and I would walk for like 2 days just to get like inspired again. And I would look at everything and just kind of take it all in. Because for me, this city really inspires me to tell these stories. You know, I'm glad my mom's not here because she would kill me if she knew I came back 3 times and did not call her. So, but I mean, I would do stuff like that just because I love it here. I think I have an angle where like finding these stories and knowing enough people out here throughout the years where I could kind of get something done, get the rights to something.
And clearly you've been very loyal to shooting in Chicago in addition to Soul Food and the Barbershop films.
Roll Bounce.
Nothing Like the Holidays. Nothing Like the Holidays was actually originally entitled Humboldt Park, correct?
Yeah, I wish they would have kept that too. Humboldt Park was a great title, and that was kind of based off my crazy Puerto Rican family growing up. And it was, you know, my father was Jewish, and my mother's Puerto Rican, so right there, that's a movie unto itself. But so we kind of like worked on it that way, and we shot that in a neighborhood, which was great. Unfortunately, the film didn't do that well, which to this day kind of kills me, but you just kind of like keep going on, and I'm always trying to find that like Latino story, you know, always looking constantly to try to find something in that world, in that space.
So aside from the inspirational factor, what do you feel are the advantages of shooting in Chicago? Do you feel that there's...
I think you got the best crews, bar none. I mean, no one works harder than the people out here. You got an amazing acting community with Second City, and then with the great, you know, Goodman Theater and all the great theaters out here. You know what I mean? So you have a great acting pool. So, you know, if you get a star of the movie, you don't have to bring out anybody else because you could cast out here, which is great. And I think, you know, I think the city itself is a character. I really do. You know, we shot a lot of these films on the South Side where it was kind of an untapped market, I felt. You know what I mean? We'd shoot both, but a lot of times we were on the South Side, and it just kind of felt like you were capturing a piece of Chicago that no one really seen. And like right now, like I think there are a lot of great crime stories that have not been done in Chicago. Like, you know, Ben Affleck and those guys own Boston with those great movies they've made. They made some amazing movies out of there. And I think Chicago could kind of find that niche in that world, which you had, like every time you see one of those great crime stories, they're all period. You know what I mean? They're all Capone or they go way back, you know what I mean? But when Michael Mann started, you know, with Thief and movies like that, you really haven't seen a lot of that here at all. So I think that's like a niche, finding stuff like that, inspirational stories.
It's a different kind of crime story, but didn't you have a Council Wars film in the works for?
Yeah, I mean, I still want to do something like that. I still think there's a great story in the Harold Washington story. You know what I mean? And during that time of politics in Chicago, I'm fascinated by Chicago politics, always have been. And as you all know, there's never a dull moment in that world. So, but no one's really like I mean, the Boss, the TV show, did a great job. I thought that first season was phenomenal. They did a great job capturing that world. But I think there's stories that kind of take place in that world that should be told, haven't been told yet.
You touched on this a little bit, and we certainly in the film office, and there's a number of people in Chicago these days that are talking about Chicago as the potential for Chicago to be the next center for film production. Obviously, there's some obstacles to that. The headquarters of the empires that make entertainment are not headquartered here, so it's difficult to get beyond that. But how do you see Chicago as in its current day as a center for production?
That's a great question. I think CineSpace, the stage, has done a great job of, like, building that stage has brought a lot of business here that, wouldn't have even thought of coming here. And Governor Quinn has been extremely supportive in the tax incentives, passing those incentives, making it easier for people to come. You got to understand with Hollywood, no one has prejudice against any city. They could care less. All they care about is how much they're going to get back. That's all they care about. So when you see all these films being shot in Georgia and Louisiana, it's not because people love it. It's because they give you 40% back on your whole spend. So for an independent financier or a studio, that's extremely enticing that you're going to recoup that money right away. And that's why those two states they got so much going on. But Chicago last year had their biggest year in history. As you know better than anybody, you guys have done a great job of promoting it, Rich, and getting the word out there.
Getting the word out, but the frustration is that it is oftentimes just about the money, where the state tax incentive is very competitive, and it's very interesting to a lot of producers. But Georgia outdoes us, and Louisiana outdoes us with bigger percentages.
You know what? When I was doing a lot of these movies, there was no incentive, so I would push to do Chicago. My push would be that it's a character. Chicago's a character unto itself. You should shoot here. It's untapped. And that worked. And for me, it still works in some cases. And they do have a 30% incentive, which is great. And you can't expect them to, out of 50 states, to have this incentive. Or really, if you want, Puerto Rico has a great incentive too, but obviously not everything makes sense, to be shot there. But those are the three biggest incentivized states. And Chicago's right there. Probably 5 or 6, wouldn't you say, or 6 or 7?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And we're not just selling the tax incentive. We're sort of selling
the city,
the overall production value.
And you have all this crew here, which is incredible. And I think it's actually growing now, which a credit to the unions out here. They're building more and more people, because there'll be a time when, it doesn't make sense for a TV show or a movie studio to come out here if they have to bring all these people. It kind of defeats the purpose of making a film here. But to the union's credits, they have really built a strong crew base, real strong.
So you, as a producer, how would you describe how different you are from those early pictures to where you are now? Obviously, you've learned a lot along the way, but I'm guessing you're not as, you're probably a little bit more cynical. You're certainly more successful.
Definitely cynical. Definitely, like I told you earlier, it's about what I can make now. It's not, unfortunately, it's not just about loving a script or loving the story. It's, can I see it to the end? Before, when I was younger, I love the script, let's do it. You know what I mean? Then I'd spend all this time trying to do it and nothing would happen. Today, I'm more to the point where, okay, let's see if there's, money to make this at the end of the rainbow. And I'm more selective just as I grow older. You know what I mean? I have different points of view. I have 3 kids. They want me to make an animated movie. I wouldn't know how to do that, but I better do it soon enough. Stuff like that where I would have never thought of before. So just as a person, you grow. You see different stories. You want it, like any artist, you kind of want to do different things. It's so funny because at first you're like, people tell you stick in your lane. Which they tell you in music, they tell you in everything you do. Stick in your lane. Stick to what you know. And there's some truth to that, but it's not bad to kind of go off a little and try something else. I worked with Billy Bob Thornton on 3 movies, and I mean, I'm from here. He's from Arkansas. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have that kind of background in common, but I truly think the guy is a genius and so talented, and just we have a great time together. And I would have never even thought in my wildest years that I'd be, working with him as often, and stuff like that. So you just kind of grow as a person. You look for different opportunities. I mean, George has films that I won't necessarily do now, and I have films that he won't necessarily do now, so we're kind of growing also as people. And then we still have the same taste, and we're working on a bunch of projects, so we kind of vary on what we do. It's kind of a natural progression, I think. It really is.
Are you pursuing any other television projects, given what you had just had to say about Barbershop? I'm curious with Netflix and other platforms out there that might...
I mean, we just sold that TV show to FX, hopefully. We are looking at other stuff, and my heart is still into movies, and I still want to do that. But the TV business is probably on such a top echelon now. I think the TV business surpasses the film business right now for quality and everything like that. And a lot of my peers who are in the film business have transferred over to TV because they find it more lucrative, but not so much about being lucrative, it's quicker. It's so much quicker. I mean, you sell a show, you write the script, are they going to make it or not? That period is 4 months. And I got these crazy movies that are like 7, 8 years. No TV show is going to go on that long. So the joy of TV is the instant kind of knowing if you're going to make it or not. And that is nice, especially after you've been working on films for so long. Like with this TV show we sold, I bet you within 4 months, 4 or 5 months tops maybe, we'll know if we're going to make it. And if we don't, then we'll figure something else out. So from a physical standpoint, that's fascinating to me. And I love these shows. I mean, just like everybody else, House of Cards, Orange is the New Black. You see Breaking Bad, you couldn't make a movie that good. You know what I mean? It's just too hard. I mean, it's incredible what they do. So you see all this talent gravitating towards TV, and you know why? Because the quality is unbelievable. It's just top notch.
I know you've also been very loyal to Columbia College, coming back oftentimes to screen films, to hire interns. In fact, you've hired any number of Columbia College grads and probably gave them their careers as well.
No, it's great. When I come back to and I go to the stage, I visit the stage at CineSpace, I see a lot of these kids who are interns on our project working full-time on these crews, which really makes you feel good. And it's something we always did. The school was great to us, and I feel like that's the least I can do for the kind of the fortunate, education I received from them. I feel like I have to give back in any way possible, and we've always hired a lot of interns. And like I said today, honestly, I go back, I see so many of these kids, and I'm looking at them like, God, I remember you, and you were doing this and this, and they're working full time, which is great. It's terrific.
Well, I want to leave some time for questions if folks have some. Please feel free to use the microphones on either side of the stage.
Good.
I actually read about you. You might hear me.
I'm not sure if that's on.
It's on. It's up.
It's up. Oh,
There you go.
okay. I read about you in Michael Ravager's book, his directing book. He talked about you. He taught you guys, you and George, in production too, I think at Columbia.
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, yeah.
Paul Heddle was production too.
It was okay. And what class did he teach for you guys? He talks about you guys in his directing
I'm 46, man. I can't.
Okay, cool. But no,
Can't remember that well.
My name is JD. I'm actually a filmmaker here in Chicago, and I studied at Columbia.
Excellent.
And I was one of the last classes that used the Bolex camera
Yeah.
before they got rid of it, like the slicing. But just 2 questions. If you were a young filmmaker now with the YouTube boom and Kickstarter and all this stuff, out of school, how would you start your career if you're starting from scratch? How would you use these tools and blogs and all these things?
That's a great question. Like, how do you use today's technology to kind of advance your career?
Yeah.
Which, it's funny for me, like I'm still not that tech savvy enough, but I'm very curious and I'm very aware of what's going on. But today, it's tricky because when we were doing it, not everybody could go make a movie, right? Today, anybody could go make a movie. You could go make a movie today if you want to. You couldn't do that 20 years ago. It's impossible. It's kind of like if you look at the record business, if you were a rock band, you could go make an album, right? You could go make an album in your garage. You could go record today. Now the movie business, TV business has become that. In one day you could go see it. So the competition is so high because there's so much out there. You're bombarded all the time with these shorts and so forth. And anybody could go make it based off any kind of camera you could go buy, which is great. So there's a great venue for that. You just have to set yourself apart. Like you have to make something that's so captivating, that's so different. You got to grab people's attention in a way that is going to stand out from everybody else. I mean, it's a great tool to use because you get your work seen out there, where before, like shooting a little short, no one would ever see it. Today, it goes viral, people pick it up. And a lot of people, there's a movie at Fox that I had nothing to do with, but my friends produced it. It was called Maze Runner. And they just shot it. It's going to come out sometime this year. And it was amazing little short that this kid made. It took him a year. Visual effects, I mean, you should look it up. You could probably find the short. And cut to, I think maybe a year and a half to 2 years after he screened that short, they made a $35 million movie based off that short. Now, obviously, I'm not crazy. That doesn't happen every day, and don't think it's going to happen. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to, but that's what I think that venue, you know, the internet and so forth is used for. You got to be really smart about it. Like, obviously, you're going to spend a lot of time making this short or TV show. So I think you really got to focus on what is going to stand out from the pack, what is going to grab people's attention, you know. And then you look at, I mean, the funniest thing too, it doesn't have to be visually stunning. It just has to be smart and clever. It's like you look at this Maze Runner, right? You couldn't ask for a better story or something like that. But then you see a film like Clerks, right? Shot for nothing. It looks terrible, but it doesn't matter. It is so phenomenally clever and smart that you gravitate towards it. So you got to kind of look at like those two things. What's going to be, what's going to grab people's attention, and then what's such an interesting subject matter that separates you from the pack. You really got to be smart because the competition is so deep.
And last question is, I guess, for me and a few other people in here. I'm not in film school now. I've been freelancing doing music videos, but I wanted to find out how could someone go about applying for an internship working with your company? Or a production?
No. I mean, listen, when we come back here, it's real easy because we're pretty accessible. And hopefully some of these movies that I explained to everybody recently are going to come back. So when we do that, it's always easy to get towards us to the school or through Cinespace. Or I see Margaret Orlando out there. She could probably help you out. Not that I'm dumping this on you, but you could it's once we're here, we're not that hard to get hold of, honestly.
Actually,
Never.
I was just going to say, when Bob or anybody actually sets up in town, our office can serve as a resource to put you in touch with the production companies or the production offices, and if they have an internship program like Bob usually does, it's an easy thing to access.
Chicago Film Office.
Chicago
right?
Film Office. Okay. In fact, our website is chicagofilmoffice.us.
Thank you, guys.
First, I just want to thank you and George for doing a great job of also pushing diversity in hire, which has been very important here, opening the doors. 2 questions. It's like in productions now, particularly independent, you see so many production companies, like even Mr. and Pete. There's I counted 8 production companies, not including Code Black and Lionsgate. If you can kind of break that down, because even apparent studio pictures seem to have a lot. Maybe that's just because they're just distributors and not studio pictures. And also, as an independent company, you guys are pretty major. It's kind of hard to discern between, is this a studio thing or just a studio distributed? Kind of break down that relationship between really the independent and studio now, and how those relationships work. Because you mentioned you had a deal before with studios, but what's the difference then between having a deal and being really with a studio picture versus your own pictures?
I mean, what's the difference between an independent? Well, we did this movie called The Inevitable Defeat of Mr. and Pete. Got amazing reviews. Couldn't ask for a better movie. Just didn't catch on in the box office. It was a small story, unfortunately, but people really seemed to like it who saw it. Not a lot of people saw it. Whoever saw it liked it. That was a movie where we raised $3.5 million. And, you know, to raise that money, we had to give, you know, you do whatever it takes to raise that money. So we had to give out a lot of credits, you know, for people to raise that money. And that was kind of, if you look at independent films, you'll see God knows how many producers, executive producers. When you kind of look at that list, in an independent world, not necessarily in the studio world, but in the independent world, when you see, most of the time, when you see all those executive producers, those 9 out of 10 times they're finance people. There might be one line producer who gets that credit, and then the producers are people who like physically make that movie. Like there were 4 producers, myself, George, and 2 other young ladies, and we were the real producers on it. And a lot of those executive producers, which I think there could have been 18, those, and I couldn't even tell you their names. That's how bad it is. They put in the money in different levels of financing throughout the film. But when you see a studio movie, you don't see that level of, because it's their money, they're financing it. So if you see an executive producer, they might be a manager of that particular client. They might have brought in the client. They might have brought the material and gave it to somebody else. So it varies. But usually in the independent world, it's kind of based off finance at the EP level.
Hi. First, I wanted to say thank you for thinking of Chicago and, you know, continuing to do projects here. And I have a project where I tell my story. It's basically me being a single mom with a son who was diagnosed with autism at 19 months. And he is now he didn't talk until he was 5 years old. But now he's 10, he's doing very well. So my story is, you know, just basically me living day by day challenges, you know, with dating or explaining to my son why his father isn't around. And he's actually producing the show with me as well. And I just wanted to know what's the best way of getting my project out to people, as far as do you go through a guild or agency in order to get it pitched to different networks?
With something like that, I mean, the first thing that you have to do is, you know, register it with the WGA. Okay. That's foremost. And with something like that, the best thing to do a lot of times is go to an agency or manager and get them to read that material, okay, which obviously is easier said than done. Right. But through connections, see, you got to understand, like assistants to agents, assistants to managers, they have to make their mark. They have to get out there and make their bones. They want to be noticed. They don't want to be someone's assistant forever, right? Right. So the best thing, in my opinion, is to get those scripts to a lot of these assistants out there. And if they find something they like, they're going to look great to their bosses. And if that script circulates amongst the agency, it's always a great way to get it done. I actually think that's a better way than approaching that individual actor or actress. That's not impossible, by the way. I mean, that stuff happens a lot too. But my humble opinion is like, by hitting these agencies, management companies, talent agencies, if you could get the attention, and they have a thing called coverage. Okay. So they submit a script and they have these readers who are basically in a room and they're like grading your script pretty much. Okay. If that script gets great coverage, people are going to read it because that's their job. And they need to kind of spot something like this and find something fresh. And if they find something fresh and feel like they can do it, then hopefully you're fortunate enough where you kind of get, you know, notice. But then also, just like I said earlier about making a movie, you don't think your first script's going to sell. I mean, get that equation out of your head. If your first script is good, maybe it gets you an agent, or maybe it gets you a manager, and they say, wow, this is a great script. I don't know if we could get this film made, but people would like to read it. So let me send it out, and if anybody reads it and likes it, they'll meet with the writer. I meet with a lot of writers. I read their script, and I'll be like, wow, I'll never make this movie in a million years. There's no way. For me, personally. Okay. But boy, that's great writing. Let me meet that person. So I meet that person, and, you know, it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes I go, hey, you know, I've been thinking this idea, and they might go, wow, I would love to do something like that. So all of a sudden, you're working with this writer, and you threw in this idea, and they're doing it. Or they might say, you know what, my next script is going to be about this. And you say, wow, I would love to work with you on that. Then you kind of start developing a project with them. I've done that in numerous times.
And actually, I already have like 3 completed shows, and it's on YouTube and on my website. Do you think?
You have 3 shows?
I have 3 shows.
Oh, that's great.
already
Webisodes kind of thing?
produced. It's 30-minute shows.
Oh, wow,
So
that's
it's like
impressive.
already 3 pilots.
Yeah, that's impressive. It's not easy to do.
Right.
As I
Well,
know.
I had a lot of help from people that believe in the project as well. So
And those webisodes are based off the script?
yes, it's based off the script with me and my son, me getting him up in the morning and just showing that he doesn't do the typical bacon and pancakes like most children, like, you know, the different sensory
That's
things
great.
that he does, as well as his presentations at school. They even allowed me to come into the school to record him doing a presentation on the state of Illinois, as well as me speaking out to, you know, the Chicagoland School for Autism to give support to other parents who have found out that their children was recently diagnosed. So,
Gotcha. Sounds like a great story.
thank you.
Wish you the best.
Thanks.
I know this young woman wanted to have a question.
Sure. Hi, my name is Crystal Barnes. Again, thank you so much for coming out here and speaking with us. Again, like this young lady, I have a completed script or a couple of scripts, and you said you were looking for that Latino script. I think I have one. I wonder, how do I specifically get a script to your office, to your assistant, possibly to get for you to read? Or
I'll say email me, then I'll give you out my email, then I'll get 100 scripts. And I'm coaching 2 Little League teams this year, so my time is like, but I have to read. So, you know, a lot of times, if someone sends a script, if they send like a 1-page outline of what it's about.
a synopsis or
Yeah, and
treatment?
listen, I might read the synopsis and say, great idea. I'll read the script, or you know what, just not for me, because I have to monetize my time.
Sure.
And I have to push the projects I have forward, but I'm always looking for something, so I'm open. So,
I have a
if you
card I can give
Facebook
you.
State Street Pictures,
Okay.
the like page, you do that. That's probably the best way to do it.
Okay.
And anybody could get hold of us through that.
Sure.
I got to look at that more often, but I will, because I'm here, so I would do that. But that's probably the best way. But if you write a synopsis, look it. Like I said, what do I know? You know what I mean? I've passed on. If I told you the stuff I passed on, boy, you wouldn't even have me up here. You know what I mean? Trust me. So I don't know everything. We don't know everything. We're still trying to figure out what's good. You know, they gave us the script. I hate it. I don't even like saying this because it drives me nuts. But they gave us training day. Stupid, I know.
Was that before Denzel was attached or after?
I'm going to say he wasn't, but it really was because I felt better if I say he wasn't. I mean, stupid, you know? There's a lot of stupid. I mean, listen, we're still learning. We're still trying to figure it out. I think we might have said, who's going to want to see Denzel as a bad guy? You know what I mean? I mean, but that's the truth. I mean, there's a lot of, and like when I say that, does that mean we would have got it? I don't know if we would have got it, but we were dumb enough to read it and say, I don't see it. You know what I mean? But there's stuff like that. So don't take our kind of, you know, if we don't do it as like, oh my God, it's not good, because what do we know? It's all, you know, it's all speculative. It's just what you're feeling at the time and what you're doing and what you're trying to do.
Okay. Thank you.
So I had to say that to, don't get discouraged if we pass on something, because like I said, you know, we don't know it all
Sure, thank you.
by any stretch.
Hey, Bob, how's it going?
Hey.
So money seems to be a consistent theme here. Money is money, obviously. We all know that. But I guess, you know, was there a time earlier in your career when you were able to make movies just because you wanted to? Like, I thought the Bobby Martinez story, I don't know if you ever made that, or the surfing one, was interesting.
That was a great story, and that script, there's a thing called the Blacklist where they pick the best, I don't know how many scripts a year that weren't made, and that script was one of them. And we had this director, Rick Romanois, who's a big director right now, has done a lot of great movies, super talented. And we were prepping the movie, and then they stopped the prep. I mean, that happens a lot in Hollywood. That was a movie we tried to get done, you know. And Bobby Martinez was a Mexican surfer who grew up outside Santa Barbara. I mean, it's a great story. But there's a lot of stories like that where we couldn't, like, kind of close the deal to get it made.
I guess that was my question. You know, you talk about money, and this is a movie you know you could never get made. Given your druthers, I guess, and if money did matter, what is one story you would just like to tell, or a movie you would like to get made if it wasn't just all about
That's
money?
a great question. For me, it would be the Harold Washington Verdoliak kind of story, that the politics in that time in Chicago. That'd be like a story that I'd love to see. Everybody has those stories. Like, one time we were chasing Marvin Gaye, a story for years. That was a story always wanted to tell, but politics and could never. I don't know if a movie like that will ever get. I think it will get made eventually someday. That was a great story. But for me, I think that like Harold Washington, not a biopic on him, but maybe those 4.5 years he was in office was a fascinating time in Chicago. It was a sad time too, obviously with racial tension, but the politics of Chicago, to me, that like exemplified Chicago politics. So for me, it would be that story.
Time for a few more questions. Yes, sir.
I'm going to try to pick this up. Actually, I'm a technology entrepreneur, and I heard two different things. That originally Matthew Prisker was one of the original people that invested in several of the companies, and also how was that experience, if that was true, that the Priskers or Matthew Prisker was a critical investor, and how was it working with their team? And then the other is, have you heard of a company called Pre-Screen, which got shut down, but it was basically Groupon meets Kickstarter, which was pretty much what everybody here is wondering is how can they take a short, then turn it into, a full-length film, but using crowdfunding as that means. But I heard that it was shut down.
I mean, Kickstarter is something. I mean, we put Mr. and Pete on Kickstarter. We found the money another way, but when people make a short, if you're going to make a short, don't make a short just to say, I'm going to make a short. It'd be better if you make a short and you have a feature-length script raring to go based off that short. So kind of you're always thinking 2 steps ahead. So if you're going to make a short, if you can, have something raring to go right after it, so you're kind of like, you're just thinking steps ahead. I mean, it's a smart way of doing business. It really is. Or make a short and then you show people, well, here's if you like this short, here's the feature and this is how I want to do it. And then it'll help you raise money if that's your ultimate goal to make that feature. So it's a great way of doing things.
Cool. And did you guys work with the Matthew
Yeah, we worked
Prisker?
with Matt for 2 years. It was a cool 2 years.
I heard
We
he's a
worked
cool
together.
guy to work with.
Yeah, definitely cool.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
Hello. I know you mentioned that you went to Columbia College of Chicago. I know there's like a big debate now of whether film school is completely necessary to start your career, or a lot of people just kind of go on doing it on their own. So I was kind of wondering how you feel film school has influenced your career, and if you feel like it really enhanced your business, or if you feel like you could have done without it.
I think for us, obviously I met my business partner there, and for me it was great. Film school was phenomenal. I got to learn what I wanted to do in film. I know I wanted to make films, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So for me, it kind of narrowed my objective of what I wanted to do. So for me, film school was great. There's a lot of people today that don't go to film school. It's kind of a catch-22. It kind of depends on the individual. If you're going to go to film school, bust your ass. Like, I'm going to go this amount of time, and you got to get some films out of it. Like, you can't just go there and kind of walk through it. You got to go there thinking 2 steps ahead. If they tell you, shoot this short, it's got to be 3 minutes. Well, make it 5 minutes. Or, we're going to shoot this project when we're seniors. Shoot it when you're a junior, so you can do another one when you're a senior. Like, take advantage of the equipment. Take advantage of the people you meet. If you have like if you're kind of by yourself, you want to make movies, you've never done it, film school is great. If there's a group of people that you're working with and you're shooting stuff, a lot of people are doing that now, not even going to film school. They just form this group and they all kind of work on each other's projects. Now, obviously, it's hard to maintain those relationships. I'm not crazy. That's not the easiest thing in the world, but it kind of depends on the individual. I know people tell me all the time, my film school, as they'll say, is watching the DVDs, the making of the film, or reading this on that. So when we were coming up, there was nothing like that. I mean, that was unheard of. You didn't see stuff like that. So I think in our time, it was more crucial to go to film school. But if you're going to go out and make films, you want to meet people, put things together, I don't think there's anything better than that.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that helps.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say I saw the movie, Mr. and Pete, and it was a wonderful movie. And the fact that it didn't go to the big screen, was a shame. The question I have for you, similar to the young lady that was talking about the scripts, You were talking about Barbershop. I was actually in Barbershop, and I want to thank you for the opportunity for me being in Barbershop. Actually, I wound up on the back of the DVD, and I was just curious if you have any upcoming projects that I could possibly audition for.
That's a good question. We are going to try to do another Barbershop film, which would be great. I hope it happens. Nothing's finalized yet. We've talked about it. We're not shooting anything at this moment, but I do plan, like all those projects I told you, I plan on doing those the next couple of years in town. And, Sharon King is someone we always use. I think today she's actually doing the NWA search.
Yeah, I just came from there.
What's that?
I just came from there.
Oh, you did? How'd you do?
The particular character that I wanted to read for, they're not looking for today. So basically, we did our slate, and I guess when they're going to be casting for that particular character, they're going to call people back. Is it possible I could leave some information with you?
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
You're
Thank
that
you.
persistent. Yes, you got
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, I get it. 100%.
One last question.
Yeah, my name is Sylvester Boyd, and thanks for coming out today.
Oh, no problem.
Basically, I'm fortunate to be at the other end. Most of these folks are young folks who are just trying to start a career. I'm 70 years old, and I decided to do some things in my old age, so I'm in a myriad. Matter of fact, Sunday night I'll be in Crisis as an extra. I've been in Shameless as an extra. Just a number of pictures. Everything that comes through, I'm probably in it, as far as the extra part goes. But what I want to talk to you about, I just wrote a book. It's called The Road for Money, and it basically is, to make a long story short, is a story of my aunt who died at 92 years old. She was born in Money, Mississippi, and I'm taking her journey from 1925 all the way through to the end of her life. And the first book ends in 1937. Okay, where she gets off the train in Chicago. And that gives the background of, it gives a lot of historical facts because I'm a historian. And the next book will go during the war, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what I'm wondering, is it better to just let the book do its thing and not push it real hard? I mean, push the movie part of it, or go into that area, just let the book get the sales and go forward, because I think it's a good book. I think it's got a lot of historical value to it.
My opinion would be let the book kind of garnish some sales, get some attention, get some critical reviews on the internet. Kind of, if you can, let it spread that way. Because if the book garnishes attention, obviously it'll kind of, it create the IP, which is intellectual property, which makes the book value more. If you went out and tried to do a movie now, first people are going to go, well, how'd the book do? So without getting the book out there first, it's kind of difficult. I would let the book do its thing, personally. That's what I would do. Get the book out there and see if it garnishes any attention.
And then I had the other last question I had was, how about the genre that it's in? How do you think that sells in today's market? I mean, from your experience.
I mean, the period movie
Yeah.
are always hard. Not impossible by any stretch of the imagination, but hard. I mean, you look at some of the movies that were nominated for Oscars. You go to, I hate to keep bringing it up, but, the producers on 12 Years Slave, he wrote that script, John wrote that script to his credit for free, and it took years to get it made. And that's, probably never took, there's stories that are a lot longer and harder than that. You just got to believe in it. You got to be passionate about it. A lot of people are going to tell you, don't do a period piece because they're trickier, which is true, but they're not impossible to do. You know what I mean? And now, a movie like Jackie Robinson makes $100 million. So it opens the doors for other movies like that to be made, and that helps. You know what I mean? But there's no rhyme or reason to this business. That's what I'm trying to kind of get across. There's no rules. There's no chart. This is how you do it. This is what you're supposed to do. For us, it was watching people like Jim Jarmusch, Spike Lee, Kevin Smith, the Hughes brothers, Singleton, like all these guys make these movies, and it made it feel like, wow, I could do that too. He didn't have a lot of money, I could do that too. Like, you know what I mean? That to us was our inspiration, kind of growing up. And then watching like Steve Jones out here make the movie, Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, with Jim McNaughton. Like that to me was touchable. Like here's these guys out of Chicago. I forgot what they made the movie for, like maybe 100 grand or something like that, right?
Under 100,000.
Under 100, right. And that movie garnished a lot of attention. It wasn't like, it didn't make a killing at the box office, but it didn't have to. Then the next movie those guys were doing, they were working with Bill Murray and Robert De Niro. You know what I mean? So if that's not a perfect case study of like showing what I mean by don't think your first film has to like be this huge success. And Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer was like a quiet, it didn't make like a lot of money, but it didn't have to. It showed that these guys were talented filmmakers and they could do whatever they wanted. And that's what it did for those guys. And that's how you got to look at, like if you believe in this project, you got to stick with it. It's not going to be easy. 19 out of 20 people will tell you no way, but there's going to be that one person. You just got to stick with it. Now, if you had a script, it'd be better than just saying you have a book. You know what I mean? Eventually, you got to get a script written off the book. That would be helpful, because if the script's great, it's going to make it easier.
You know, the people I'm working with on the book, they take it to the next step. So
Right.
Yeah.
Get the book out. Garnish as much attention as you can.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to have to wrap it up, folks. I just want to say thanks to Mr. Bob Teitel. Thank you for being here, Bob.
Thank you.